with the dissolution of the organs of the All Progressive Congress at the state, zonal, and national levels, analysts are saying that President Muhammadu Buhari and governors of the party have consolidated their hold on the party ahead of the 2023 general elections. The A.P.C National Executive Committee has risen from its emergency meeting in Abuja with a resolution dissolving the party's organs. The committee also extended by 6 months the tenure of the party's caretaker and extraordinary National Convention Planning Committee headed by Yobe State Governor Mai Mala Buni. The caretaker committee was raised in June following the dissolution of the National Working Committee led by immediate past National Chairman Adams Oshomole, whose suspension plunged the party into a leadership crisis with 2 factions of the party laying claims to its interim chairmanship. At the meeting, it also announced that the party's former national vice chairman, South Iliad Eta, had been expelled from the party for going to court to seek a judicial review of sacking the Oshomole-led National Working Committee. It was also gathered that NEC queried the summon of the president by the House of Representatives and prevailed on him to rescind his decision before he could appear before the joint session of the National Assembly tomorrow to brief the lawmakers on what the administration is doing to tackle the worsening insecurity challenges in the country. Tunde, what's your make of all of this?
Our director asked you to smile.
And you gave him laughter. I'll start there. Anyway, I just feel that none of this was surprising. It was always clear that that 6-month mandate that the Mai Mala Buni committee had was a little short for them to discharge what it is that they wanted to do. So the fact that it's been extended to next June did not surprise me. I'm sure it didn't go down too well with everybody, but it came as no surprise. What I found shocking is the idea that the president, or the suggestion that the president shouldn't honor the invitation by the House of Reps. That would be an absolute disaster to renege at this point. And I do urge the president and his advisors to completely ignore that. There's nothing untoward about that invitation, and it's to his credit to honor that invitation. As for the collapse of the party structure, everything in A.P.C is always pointed out to be against the presidential ambition of Tinubu in 2023. It's all to curtail him, taking the party structures and putting under the control of the president and the governors. But either way you want to look at it, it is some kind of power play. So we'll see how that pans out. The other thing that I found interesting was about party discipline and the expulsion of Iliad Eta, because you'll recall that all A.P.C, disgruntled A.P.C members were asked to withdraw their cases in court, and he did not do so. So they really have thrown the book at him. He's been expelled from the party, but he does not appear to be taking it in his stride at all. He's going to fight that. And so we wait to see the outcome of a lot of what was deliberated upon. But for me, it was alarming, the idea that the president should not honor that invitation, which he's going to honor tomorrow. I do hope he turns up for that. I hope that we don't see any kind of reversal. And I appreciate the vice president's input as a lawyer, pointing out the legality or otherwise of this move of collapsing the party structure. We might see a plethora of court cases. We might not. It depends.
Dr. Bati?
Well, quite a number of issues arising from the National Executive Committee meeting of the A.P.C that took place yesterday. It was a combination of physical and virtual meeting. And there may be questions arising therefrom, which I will address in a short while. And the overall objective that was pointed out was that that meeting was meant to reposition the party and reinvigorate the party. At the end of the meeting, the resolutions were communicated to the public by the governor of Kaduna State, Malam Nasir El-Rufai. Now, one of the issues they dealt with, one, was the extension of the tenure of the caretaker committee, the 13-member caretaker committee, for another 6 months. Now, what would be the justification for this? When that caretaker committee was set up, the argument was that, look, it will organize a national convention and resolve conflicts within the party having become so divided in many states. As the Bune committee, caretaker committee, been able to achieve that, well, many people will say no, because the party remains divided, particularly in Zamfara, in Ondo, in Ekiti, and in Edo states. So there's still a lot of work to be done in that regard. The second argument is the propriety of the extension itself. There may be persons within the party that may question it, because some people claim that, look, by putting Bune in charge and by giving that committee an extension, it's like a fight, a battle for the soul of the party itself. among the various constituent parts. In other words, it will look like the AMPP wing, if that is the appropriate label, has seized control or has taken over control of the party, and with the governors and the president working together. So we may see a lot of fallout in terms of the battle for the soul of the party. The third major point with regard to that is Malam Buni is a full-time governor in Yobe State. Can he, under the party constitution, also hold a full-time job?
No.
As chairman of a caretaker committee,
no,
which will take all his time. It's not as if he's running a foundation.
It's taking his time already.
The chairman and the secretary are, full-time managers of the party. That is one. Now, another issue they raised was about national security, and they said it should not be politicized, and that the PDP is politicizing national security. The party says it regrets what is going on, but that all hands should be on board, and the PDP should stop playing politics. The third point, which you raised, about whether the president should go tomorrow or not to the House of Representatives. Well, it will look like the soft test is that the governors were putting pressure on the president not to establish a precedence. Because if it happens, then they perhaps are acting not out of their support for the president, but out of enlightened self-interest. Because you could then have houses of assembly also summoning the state governors to come and give account. But it's not the same. In this particular case, I think, as Speaker Bajamia Miller pointed out, that the decision is for the president to make, and that, there's no point putting the president under pressure. And I think that the president should go ahead, because it's not just addressing the National Assembly, it's addressing Nigerians on a matter of urgent national importance, and he should refuse to be persuaded. Another issue is the propriety of holding that meeting inside the council chambers. People have raised that question about the venue. When did the council chambers at the presidential villa become a space for a political party?
Time.
And are they going to pay rent for using that space?
Good question.
It's becoming a habit.
Yeah. Another one was that the Attorney General of the Federation was reportedly the person that sworn in this caretaker committee. Okay, fine. I mean, I don't have a problem with that. I guess it's also a notary public, and if it's a notary public, yes, he can do that ex gracias. I hope he was doing it as a noble gesture. But there are maybe some people who may query that. The other point, because, let me just summarize, is that of Iliadeta, who has been expelled from the party. Now, the Constitution says if you are aggrieved in any particular way, the best place to go is the court, not to resort to self-help. Is the party not acting ultra vires by stopping an individual who says that his rights have been abridged from going to the court? Is that an ouster? Is there an ouster clause in the Constitution of the A.P.C. that says if you are aggrieved, you cannot go to court?
The A.P.C.
Or is it an appeal?
You are supposed to exhaust the internal party dispute resolution mechanisms before you go to court.
But you know that has not worked.
He can argue, yes, he can argue that he has tried to exhaust those mechanisms and is exercising his constitutional right to approach the court.
Yeah, and then, of course, there may be members of the party who may even question the resolutions and ask whether the NEC was properly constituted. Yes. Because it was a virtual meeting. Does the constitution of the A.P.C. allow for a virtual meeting? And if it does, under what circumstances? And is that recognized? So there are so many issues that they will have to deal with. But the bigger issue is that the party, yes, can insist that it wants to reposition itself, it wants to reinvigorate itself, and that's why it has dismantled all structures at the state level. You recall last month, the caretaker committee chairman said the party was going to come up with a new register. So there's nothing wrong in the party reorganizing itself. But the subtext of it...
It argued that there's something wrong with it, because the party structures have their tenure.
That is the point made by the vice president.
So this is the thing. So there might be all these plethora of lawsuits.
Yeah.
You never know.
For me, what really concerns me, that's their internal wrangling. That's their problem. For me, what concerns me is the president addressing the nation tomorrow.
That's the most important thing for me.
An insecurity challenge that is killing a lot of Nigerians. Whatever they do, that's...
It's really unfortunate that was even raised, that was even challenged. It should not have been.
That's their wrangling. That's all on headline news. We'll take a short break now. When we return, we'll have the trio of Roots to do with Michael Wilson and Aaron Akerila. Because updates, Africa, global business, and COVID-19 pandemic. Stay with us.
Good morning. Welcome back. Still the morning show right here. Wonderful morning right here. When you're talking business and you want to know about the business of the day, it's Rotus's business to let you know.
Thank you so much, Rufai. Good morning to you. Good morning, Tundu. And good morning, Doctor.
Good morning.
So we begin with a tweet from President Buhari with respect to a meeting that he had with the governors. And he talks about, there it is, it says, meeting with state governors. I explained the closure of Nigeria's land borders was partly an attempt to control smuggling in of weapons and drugs. Now, I have to kiss is key here. Now that the message has sunk in with our neighbors, we're looking into reopening the borders as soon as possible. So there again, we have that message of soon. The Vice President Osibanjo back in September, he said land borders will reopen soon. Then we had the Minister of Finance about 2 or 3 weeks ago talking to journalists. She said it will reopen soon. Then we had the Agric Minister, Minister Nanono, who said it wouldn't be reopened. And then now we've got the President saying that they are going to be reopened soon. So the thing is, there's a whole lot to look at with respect to the impact of the land border closure on the country. The president says that the message has sunk in, but sunk in, how do you measure it? When you make a policy decision, your policy decision has to be measured one way or the other, right? So how do we measure the fact that this message has sunk in with the neighbors? I'll tell you what we can measure. We can measure the fact that inflation has been climbing since the borders were closed in August of 2019. We can measure that food prices have continued to rise since the borders have been closed. We went over the Q3 trade data yesterday. Agriculture amounted to about 2% of total exports when we looked at the trade in the third quarter. We can measure the fact that agricultural outputs, GDP, has been slowing since Q4 of 2019, right? We're at 1.38% now for the this last quarter for GDP. So those are the things that we can measure. And I have to tell you, I mean, since the borders have been closed, not quite sure how we can measure what the positive impact has been with respect to reducing. So, okay, how much smuggling was there of drugs and food and weapons? How much of it was happening before the borders were closed? Okay, so since the borders have been closed, now how much of it has been reduced? There was a public spat between the Foreign Affairs Minister in Ghana and Jeffrey Oyema, our Foreign Affairs Minister here, where she said she came all the way to Nigeria to have a meeting and nothing productive happened. So, I mean, all these things were happening in the middle. And so I'm not sure how the president thinks that one tweet is just supposed to tell us that the message has sunk in. And then again, there is still no set date for when the borders will be reopened. Christmas is, the Yuletide season is here. We had a special report with Chinemeriam Joseph in our Abuja studios that looked at the cost of airline tickets. Domestic airline tickets have doubled. Nigerians are groaning under the cost. We had a special report on that. Demand is increasing for all these things as traveling is happening across the country for the Yuletide season. You know that food prices are going to increase further as the Yuletide season gets closer. So supply has been affected by flooding. Supply has been affected by terrorists killing farmers in the northern parts of the country, the herdsmen clashes. So there are so many shocks to food supply. The border closure is another shock, and yet there's nothing on when the borders will be reopened. It's still soon. Anyway, to population. The National Population Commission has estimated that Nigeria's population now is at 206 million. They were doing this during the 11th phase of the enumeration area demarcation, where they're going to be setting out, setting the stage for the next census. The chair of the A.P.C, Mr. Nasir Issa Kwara, says that there should be another census around the middle of 2022. Of course, he may also say while he was speaking to journalists that the A.P.C is just making estimates here. Their last estimate in 2018 was, what was the last estimate? 198 million. So, I mean, again, that's 198 million in 2018, 206 million in 2020. That's about a 4% growth over those 2 years. If you divide it by 2, that's the 2% growth they're estimating. But again, he made it very clear that since there hasn't been a census since 2006, the last 14 years, that all they can do is to make an estimate. And then he says that perhaps there'll be another census in the middle of 2022. Again, Nigeria's population continues to grow. It puts pressure on social services, welfare. It puts pressure on GDP growth. Our GDP has not, estimated population growth is what, 2.6, 2.7%. We continue to grow. Our resources are being constrained as a result of population growing. I can't remember the last. I remember seeing family planning ads a lot in the 90s. And this was pushed by the government, where the people were advised to keep their family sizes small. I haven't really seen those in recent times. So population continues to grow. We see pressure. We still don't have a census. This is still a data issue. But again, I know the president, I think, allocated some funds in the next budget to try and get this done. And hopefully we have another population census in the middle of 2022 is pretty far. But hey, next up, finally, the fuel price cut that we heard about, the breaking news yesterday, where the fuel price was cut to about 5 naira to 162 naira per litre, 162.44. Apparently, it was done to appease labor in the ongoing deliberations that they've had. But this contradicts the free market philosophy that they were supposed to be put in place with respect to fuel prices moving in tandem with crude oil prices. So, what does a 5 naira cut do to anyone? The people who really consume the most fuel, you're essentially giving a tax cut to the wealthiest Nigerians and larger businesses that consume the most fuel at the top. Not really sure how it translates. I mean, a price cut is a price cut. If you add 5 naira over every time you buy fuel over a calendar year, perhaps there's some savings there. But doing this to appease labor, they're still also talking about the electricity tariffs. I believe the next meeting they're going to have is January 25th or so. This contradicts the free market forces and deregulation that we're seeing.
I mean, amazing stories. I want to kick first on the population. You were right. Rotus, that time you were seeing a lot of those family planning ads. Nigeria was still pegged at about 88.6, thereabout million. That was, after the census in the 90s. And it's just amazing how we've grown. And somebody will have only expected that if our birth fecundity was that high, can't our economic fecundity be that high? But that's a subject for debate. We are growing around 3%. Because if they say a couple of years ago, 196 million was the target number, and in the space of 3, 4, 5 years, we've just gone about 206 million. It shows you the country of a lot of very young people. The median age in this country is about 18, 19. A lot of people fall into the category of 15 to 50, around that center. A lot of people are young people, they're youth in this country. And it just shows you that you must have to plan for that generation. So the big question should be, yes, we're having all those numbers. Yeah, just like population anywhere in the world, it could be a blessing and a curse if you don't utilize population effectively. So what plans are we having for those numbers increasing by the day? Because it's obvious, it looks as though you can't stop the fecundity, of Nigerians. People want to have children in this country. It could be a cultural thing. It could be anything. But how can we ensure that those people start to move the needle? In fact, I think Google did a survey a couple of years back and talked about the fact that most of the workforce in the world will come from Africa in the next 10, 15 years. They're going to have 300 million strong force working Africans over the next 10, 15 years, and how we put that in turn and help. Yeah, another question I'd like to ask is this. So this 5 naira drop in all of this, that means to me that if they can drop 5 naira, they can also drop another 5 naira, making 10 naira. Right. So they can actually balance the levers of this fuel price. Why are they not doing it? And what's all this talk about deregulation if there's still price control?
Exactly. Well,
where are the market forces?
Well, the government is insisting that there is still deregulation in place, that fuel subsidy has been removed. But this was part of the negotiations with Labour. And what has been done, we're told, is that the NNPC, which is the sole importer of petrol, has been asked to adjust freight and demurrage. So that 5 naira, represents what goes on freight and demurrage. So nobody should jubilate yet as the spot price of crude goes up. And our expectation is that by January it will be about $50 per barrel or even more. Then definitely the pump price of petrol will still go up. Right. So for the benefit of people who may be jubilating, they should know that government is not planning to tamper with the market forces index that they talked about in March. Now, second, on the question of population. Population has always been very controversial in Nigeria. since the 1953 census, which was cancelled 1953, 1963. Every other census that we have conducted since then has always ended up with controversy. And the issue is usually this geopolitics. Who has more people? Who should have more revenue, more allocation from the federal revenue allocation formula? Who has more people? And Nigeria, one of the major issues of contention is that Nigeria is one of those very few countries in the world. Some even say that it's the only country in the world where you have more people as you move towards the desert, and you have fewer people as you move towards the forest region. And this has been a big debate, north and south divide over the years. The danger in it is that, look, we've been planning in the dark. We've been running a system whereby you plan without data. A country that does not have a proper enumeration of housing, proper enumeration of human beings. At a time, it became a major political issue when some people were making certain derogatory statements about goats and whatever. But I don't want to go into that. Now, on the basis of this, however, people are also saying, even at 206 million, we are too many. And that government should begin to talk about a workable national population policy, as we have seen in other parts of the world. Because if your population rate is growing at a higher rate than your GDP, you are just producing more people, then that's a prescription for chaos. And I hope that it's a debate that we can return to. How many of us can, continue to stay in this country? In the 80s, 90s, there was a national population policy. We talked about 4 children per family unit, but nobody ever respected that. Issues of religion came in, culture came in, and you know the standard Nigerian expression, you don't count children. You can have as many as you want, and it's God that looks after children. These are the cultural attitudes towards population. But we cannot continue like that.
All right. Thank you so much for
I'd have loved to chip in, but unfortunately...
Never microseconds.
No, I need a tinfoil hat. You like reading my mind.
Okay.
You do. You like zap my thoughts. I wanted to talk about the population, but never mind. Let's go.
All right. So let's just go straight to it. Michael Wilson joins us now from London. Thank you, Ruth, anyway. Michael Wilson joins us now from London. Yeah, Michael?
Hey, good morning.
Do we count children in the UK?
First of all, I give you... Sorry, say again?
Do we count people's children in the UK? Because here we don't count people's children.
Well, I mean, I was born just after the Second World War, and there was a feeling then that families would have 2 children spaced by about 4 years. So I have a sister who's 4 years younger than me, and so we were a 2-children family. I think you're absolutely right. I think there's lots of groups decide to impose their personality in a community, then they have more children. There are no warnings here so far. It's a very difficult thing to do, isn't it, to control people's natural wish to have large families. I, for all sorts of reasons, have 1 son, but I've got 2 grandchildren, so that keeps me going. And to be quite honest, at Christmas, that's enough, isn't it, really? I mean, it gets expensive after that, doesn't it? Anyway, there we go. Asia. Sorry to be like that. I'm not that mean, I promise. Asia, first of all, equity markets off to a relatively positive start. It's all about this new $916 billion stimulus plan, which was proposed last night. This came from the White House. Proposed last night after the markets had closed in the United States. US Treasury Steve Mnuchin. But as I say, proposed from the White House, it might be that it could be a chance to sort of break the deadlock, which has been, going on for months, as we know. So this flowed through into Asian markets. Nikkei up over 1%, Kospi up 2%. In China, markets finally shrugging off their geopolitical nerves. Shanghai Composite up very, very slightly. Hang Seng also up 2. So in Asia Pacific today and the whole of that region, the market data has been relatively positive. Certainly, the region itself will outperform quite significantly on this kind of vaccine-led pandemic recovery. New Zealand, Japan, China's inflation fell unexpectedly year on year, but that's down to a good thing for them. It means there's been a fall in pork prices. It's the world's largest consumer of pork, as you probably know. Strong yuan's helped that, but also the fact that maybe there are more pig pigs around. I mean, after the pandemic, who knows? That seems to be what those are kind of project. So let's go back to the US and this stimulus thing. Steve Mnuchin, it's a proposal. As I say, it came through after the markets closed in New York, but it's lifted futures, basically. And it originated, as I say, from the White House, not from the Democrats, and so it may have a better chance of heading through. But so therefore, futures, even though the Nasdaq and the Dow were up yesterday and the S&P 500 were up yesterday, futures are up as well. That should mean that equity markets in Europe do a similar kind of thing, monetary policy and a vaccine-led recovery. Now, it's dinner and it's deadlines. Here's Boris Johnson heading over to have dinner with EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen to see if they can put the talks back on track. Now, let's be clear about what this is. This is not, everybody's saying this is an 11th hour discussion. I don't think it is. I think what this is, they'll have dinner together, and who would not wish to be a fly on the wall? But they'll have dinner together, and I think they'll be talking about, are there any areas in which they might be able to budge? Now, without getting too technical about it, you remember I've been talking for months also about this Northern Ireland protocol business. Now, that has been moved aside from the discussions. Apparently, it's been solved. I don't know how it's been solved. We'll have details about that later on. It's a very, very complicated and fairly domestic-leaning thing, so I won't bother you with the details. But the fact of the matter is this. Look, if that is a big sticking point, and that's been sort of solved, then if these two people are sitting down to dinner, put it very boldly, and I'm not a political analyst, I keep saying to you, I'm just taking an outside view. So why on earth are they sitting down to dinner? Does that suggest something positive? Yes, it probably does. Even without the pandemic, a no deal would be absolutely terrible, not just for the UK, but also for the EU, because the EU doesn't want another fiscal impasse, an age, as they trying to discuss their own aid package, which again we've talked about. So they're still doing that, and that's going to be part of this summit coming up tomorrow. So maybe there's some sort of calculation behind this. So what we're hoping for, if I can put it in a nutshell, less pig-headedness, perhaps, and a bit more negotiation. Would the world be a better place if we all had that? I'll finish off with commodities. Oil consolidates at the top of its range. Nothing really driving it, apart from the fact that tonight, or in rather tonight in our terms, in your terms, we get the US inventory figures and profit taking basically hitting gold in Asia. That's about it, and that's your global view.
Right, okay, Michael, is it going to be the last supper for the UK before they crash out of the EU? Because it looks as though, to me, they're going to crash out. And are those European countries that are going to be there with Ursula von der Leyen in our meeting, are they going to be like the disciples that will be leaving the UK very soon?
Okay, so her first loyalties are to the EU. There's no question about that. Number two, no discussions have been allowed to take place unilaterally with EU leaders like Macron and like Angela Merkel. Macron needs to play well away from home. He needs to be the voice of protest. He needs to make his mark with the French public. Angela Merkel does not need to do that. She needs to be the voice of reason, hence what we've heard from her. But there'll be no discussion with that. The only discussion will be between Boris Johnson and Ursula von der Leyen. I love your thing about the Last Supper. I got a great cartoon about that, the original Last Supper, but they're all distanced because of the pandemic, and somebody's complaining, one of the disciples is complaining about interference on the internet. There'll be none of that. They sit down together, face to face. Both of these are very persuasive people. As I say to you, I don't think it's a last ditch. I think what we're talking about is there any room for manoeuvre? It's just as if, I don't know what you do with your wage proposals and the rest of it in your country, but in our country, you can be right down to the line. You think nothing's going to happen, then you sit down with somebody and it's face to face and you say, look, all right, we're not going to get a deal that everybody wants. Can we get some kind of compromise on this? As I've been saying all along, I think that's what we're looking at this evening. I don't think it's last ditch. I don't think it's a last supper. I think it's, look, the grown-ups, as I said yesterday, are in the room. Is there any room for manoeuvre here?
Well, Michael, quickly, yesterday, the Australian Parliament passed a new law under which Scott Morrison, the Prime Minister, has now been given powers to tamper with foreign agreements between states and universities and international, foreign governments. Is this a case of the Aussies engaging in a show of, self-assertiveness, even when it may be difficult to cancel many of those agreements? About 130 with about 30 countries, but it looks like the main target is China, the Belt and Road Initiative. What are the implications? Is it something that would get them bigger sanctions from China?
I would hope that what happens is we see a very different China in 2021. Not that they will measure anything about what they do in terms of Western centuries and the rest of it, or Western years, but I would hope they do. This is Australia saying, and we have talked about this before, that they proposed this, now it's been passed in their parliament. They will not allow states or states that wish to have agreements with foreign countries individually, and individual states having agreements with foreign countries will have to get it passed by the parliament. Now, this is clearly targeted towards China. Australia is feeling the brunt of China's tariffs on its big exports there, which are wine and lobsters and so on, plus the picture on Twitter of the Australian soldier with his knife to the throat of the Afghan child and so on. These are very, very high stakes. But I think this is what countries do. If I was Scott Morrison, I'd be doing exactly the same kind of thing. Australia is a proud, independent country. As we've talked in the past, it is often a bit of a one-trick pony. It's got industrial products, it's got wine, and it's got seafood and the rest of it. And it's already had its export markets actually threatened by China's tariffs. It obviously will need to navigate in the world. Maybe we'll have a better deal with Australia as well, as we are sort of relative cousins. But the fact of the matter is, you're absolutely right. This is going to be fairly crucial. It's a big issue. It's a big political issue. I think we're going to hear a lot about this in 2021. I would hope that China and Australia start to talk slightly more than just threaten each other.
All right.
Thank you, Michael.
So much, Michael. Really appreciate you, Michael. Is it time to vaccinate the world? Yeah. Can I call him the vaccine man? But it's here on Akirejala with COVID-19 update.
And Tundum, looking fierce in your animal skin print.
Really?
Yes.
I knew he was going to say something.
You said animal skin?
All right, let's get straight into the numbers today.
Aaron, you said animal skin?
Yes.
Is that like the animal instinct in you?
Right. Now, looking at the numbers that are actually coming in the last 24 hours. Still looking grim, I must say, because the numbers for the cases that have actually come in is actually up by 6%. Looking at that, in the last 24 hours, 533,308 cases were recorded in the last 24 hours. You can see deaths also up by 7%. 9,841 were the numbers that actually came in. Now, moving on to the U.S. The U.S. has actually hit a major green milestone. They've crossed the 15 million mark as of yesterday. As of this morning, it's 15.2, which is up by 18%. The last 24 hours, they had 219,944. Deaths are up by 39%. And the one that worries me the most, because they are breaking point, is the hospitalization numbers, up by 22%. 104,600 were the numbers recorded in the last 24 hours, which is quite frightening, I must say. Even in Nigeria, we're beginning to see a surge in the number of cases, because here in Nigeria, we recorded 550 new cases of COVID-19. This is the highest we've seen in a very long time. As a matter of fact, the last time we saw numbers this close were back on the 23rd of August, where we brought in about 601. It is really scary, because the highest so far has been 745. That was back in June. So we are recording 550, showing that this is still on the rise. One death was recorded in the last 24 hours. Like we're seeing on our board there, whatever you need concerning COVID-19, the place to go to is RI.TV. You just go to the COVID-19 section there. There's a full breakdown of the numbers, both globally and locally, if you want to get everything just go there and you would actually click on the boards, and it actually is quite interactive to get you the numbers and get you everything you need to know about COVID-19. Now, guys, for the brevity of time, let's actually get into this right now. We've been speaking about the Pfizer-BioNTech efforts, talking about that particular vaccine that has made groundbreaking efforts. Yesterday, we saw it being rolled out in the UK. But right now, the US Food and Drug Administration are actually even giving it even a bigger pass mark, as a matter of fact, because they have said that due to the data they received, hundreds and hundreds of pages of data, they found out that that particular vaccine actually kicks in within 10 days of the first dose, that there is major protection within 10 days of the first dose, which is huge. Understanding that a lot of talks were about the fact that you still needed 2 doses after 29 days to have full protection. But right now, the US Food and Drug Administration are even saying you don't even need to go that far. After the first dose, within 10 days, protection is actually being noticed in those patients that were studied. And this must be said that, remember, Dr. Fauci, the head of the infectious diseases in the US, criticized this particular vaccine at a certain time. But right now, looking back at this, of course, that was major error in hindsight, knowing that now the FDA in the US are saying that this vaccine is the real deal. And let's see how far we can actually go with this particular vaccine. That brings me to the point of how do vaccines get shared globally? Now, the talk has been that as it stands right now, 9 out of 10, before we get into that particular one, 9 out of 10 people in 70 developing countries might not get this vaccine by next year. We're not even talking about this year. We know that certain people will get it this year, those that are more vulnerable and those that are in the front line. But even for people, for countries like ours that are in down there, that are in low, middle income developing countries, we might not get this vaccine by next year, because most countries, the rich countries, have actually stockpiled these vaccines or pre-ordered these vaccines that might not even be able to go around. We know the rich countries make up about 14% of the global world population, but they've actually made promising vaccines buys of about 53% when you look at it closely. Canada is one country that has bought and pre-ordered vaccines, so much so that if they were to vaccinate everyone in Canada, it would actually go around 5 times. But when we now look at that particular chart that was brought up earlier, it actually shows all the countries there. The only country in Africa that has been able to get on any kind of list, any kind of pre-order list at the moment is Egypt there. You can see the EU, the US, Japan, UK, Italy, Netherlands, France, Canada, China, Brazil, Argentina, India, Spain. All these countries have actually pushed the boundaries and ensured that they got something to keep their citizens safe. And it has left developing countries literally hanging down, knowing that I said something about the low and lower middle income countries where Nigeria actually falls. 5 of them, which includes Kenya, Myanmar, Nigeria, Pakistan, and Ukraine, have seen over 1.5 million cases, and yet these countries might not even get the vaccine. But before I come to you guys, some news is actually coming in about hand sanitizers. Everyone uses hand sanitizers. As a matter of fact, hand sanitizers is in vogue right now in the bid to actually combat COVID-19. But as it stands right now, it's been found that hand sanitizers that do not even have non-alcoholic hand sanitizers as effective. That is what a study from the Brigham University in the US are saying, that hand sanitizers that are non-alcoholic are as effective as hand sanitizers that are alcoholic, as a matter of fact, because of a particular active agent in the non-alcoholic hand sanitizers, which is the benzalkonium chloride. Benzalkonium chloride is the active agent in hand sanitizers that are not alcoholic, and they found that that is enough to ensure that it probably kills COVID-19 on surfaces, as against just the talk earlier that said that only hand sanitizers that were 60% to 70% and above alcoholic contents were very viable.
So the advice is changing on hand sanitizers, and I wonder if the advice might change on vaccines.
Probably.
Obviously, COVID nationalism is just the ugliest part of this whole race for a vaccine. And it's really unfortunate that developing countries like Nigeria have been left in the cold at this moment. But there's also the possibility, the rather worrying possibility, that the virus could mutate, rendering all these vaccines completely useless in that eventuality. So what do we know at this point about whether these vaccines are evolution-proof? Because we all know that some of these pathogens are extremely clever and will find other ways of attacking the immune system. It happened with HIV/AIDS and the drugs for that. Initially, it was widely touted, everybody celebrated, but it ended up being ineffective. Remember, with malaria as well, after a while, the received wisdom suddenly fails.
Well, however, there is... okay, go ahead.
Doctor, I think looking at this closely, the new technology that we've been celebrating, that Pfizer, BioNTech are using, and Moderna also using the mRNA, I think probably maybe puts a little bit of ease to the mind when it comes to the mutation of these particular vaccines. Because when you have to trick your body into producing antibodies, ultimately then fighting it, then I think it might not be the silver bullet, but it will be close.
Yes, I was saying, however, there is a lot of excitement about the efforts that scientists are making with regard to vaccines.
Yeah.
In the UK yesterday, we were told that there was a lot of excitement. You cited the case of Ms. Keenan, the first woman, the 90-year-old, the first person in the world.
Margaret.
Margaret Keenan, to take the vaccine. And yesterday, quite a number of senior citizens also took the vaccine in the United Kingdom. So that has raised hope. And you pointed to Pfizer and BioNTech. As reviewed by the FDA in the U.S. On Thursday, the U.S. is going to have its advisory meeting, particularly on the Pfizer vaccine, which they've confirmed, does not have any side effects. So that, again, is an indication of hope. In India is already saying that 3 different vaccines will be considered by the government, and India is ready also to roll out. But for me, the more exciting news has to do with the AstraZeneca vaccine. There was a story or an article, a peer-reviewed article that was published in Lancet, the medical journal, yesterday. And the whole point is that, the scientists who reviewed the late-stage trial of the AstraZeneca Oxford University vaccine are saying that, in fact, it's 70% effective. And, Rufai always talks about the need for peer review. So that, again, constitutes a ray of hope. But as for Nigeria, I'd like to ask you this question. Maybe you have additional information. What do we know about these numbers that have suddenly gone up? I mean, since August 22, they've been reporting very low infection rates.
Yeah.
The highest, maybe about 10 days ago, was about 301. Now, all of a sudden, we're reporting 500. Is it that there is increased testing? And if so, what does this tell us about what the authorities should do? Are there certain parts of the country that have been identified where lockdown may be necessary? I don't know whether you have any additional information.
Now,
we'll continue to say that Nigeria also should begin to look for vaccines and not wait for charity.
We should.
Under the Gavi Alliance. The Senate has already, pushed in that direction. We haven't had any feedback to that, a suggestion by the Senate from either the CDC or the Ministry of Health.
Now, Doctor, the point is looking at the data that was published, the NCDC didn't give any particular reason to the rise in numbers because we're seeing Lagos yesterday brought in 219, while the FCC had the second highest, which was 168, then Kaduna State with 52, Kwara with 19, Kano, and on and on and on. This just simply shows probably that testing is being ramped up. We know we're getting to the Utah season, and there have been talks about people being careful and cautious during the seasons, not to travel. This is what the PTF has been talking about. So I think it's still down to testing majorly, because we've not seen these numbers in a very long time. Like we said earlier on, the 23rd of August was the last time we saw over 600 numbers coming in. Now, yesterday we saw 550 with 1 death, which is quite worrisome. For those who think that this has blown over, that means it's still very much there with the people. And more importantly, we need to still be very cautious. Hand sanitizing, wash your hands, all the hygiene requirements, social distancing, and the wearing of face masks will still go a long way in helping people. Because right now, we've all relaxed and just let our guards down.
Right. My comment will be quickly this. Vaccines won't save your life. You know what will save your life? An effective vaccination program. And that is what is most important across the countries that have vaccines. That's what the UK is trying to do.
Yeah, that's what they're saying in the UK.
Because vaccines normally will not save your life. It's when you have an effective vaccination program that goes round, that a sizable amount of people have a herd immunity. That's where you can stop the resurgence of something. That's what people were trying to build, with a normal way herd immunity. But it wasn't working before we finally got these vaccines in. Very, very important concerns. I'm still concerned about the peer review. And one of the largest peer review we'll see is even when people start to take these vaccines. I want to see when they vaccinate the first 1 million people in the UK, first 10 million people, and let's get reactions from them. How do they feel like? So we can document all of those peer review mechanisms and document all the reactions and all of that. But good move for the UK. The Americans too are coming on strong.
Yes, they are.
It's another possibility for them. But my fear in all of this are countries like Nigeria, like Dr. Abati stated rightly. Most developed countries, a report came out saying most developed countries, or most of these countries on the front line, have vaccines to go around 5 or 6 people. I think, and I might say something that might be very jarring because of the severity of COVID. Would it be out of place, Dr. Abati, correct me if I'm wrong on this, that the government should, talk about the possibility of going into sovereign wealth fund accounts or excess crude accounts to bring out some money to get vaccination? Would it be out of place to say that?
Well, we have to look for the money, considering the seriousness of the problem. And that was why the Senate already promised that, if it will require budgeting, the budgeting process and the input of the National Assembly, that they are ready to support the Nigerian government.
Because it's as if we are taking it with less severity. But my also fear, just like my fear is about the pension fund I want to be taking, is if we now go and dip our hands into somewhere like the excess crude accounts, wouldn't the money be fretted away? Aren't we even going to get fake vaccines? We're going to talk about this story later. But see a report, see a fake COVID vaccine, a fake COVID test that's been done by the authorities in the airport.
Yeah.
That scares everybody.
Now, Rufai,
is it by the authorities or by certain
unscrupulous elements that represent the authorities?
Now, Rufai, probably
those are just my fears.
This might be a silver lining in a very dark cloud, and that is the fact that the Oxford AstraZeneca effort, they said that 67% of the vaccines they will create between now and the end of next year will go to developing countries. But the unfortunate thing is that they can only serve...
Because it's cheap.
So yes, it's cheap, but it cannot even go round because they can only serve 18% of those that actually do need it.
Aaron, we need to go quickly, but my fear is this. Once these people vaccinate their people, they're going to put a badge out there that if you don't have a COVID vaccine certificate, don't come into our country.
True.
That's where they're going.
They've started printing certificates in the UK.
Yeah, that's where we are going. Yeah. Once they vaccinate their people, they put a leash, you don't come in.
Now, pictures have actually emerged on social media about the cards, the COVID-19 cards, by the NHS in the UK. So it's going to happen.
So we should be ready for that. Thanks so much.
In any case, even in the UK, the chief scientific advisor is saying, yes, there is a vaccine now, but at the same time, people should continue to use their masks.
Masks, very important. Very important.
Because the ordinary man may not even get it until the middle of next year.
Yeah.
May not have access to the vaccine.
Yeah.
So here, we should also mask up. We should take the necessary precautions.